good evening. It is September 22nd, 2014, and I'd like to welcome you to yet another edition of County Fair. Have you ever thought about business? Have you ever thought about business in Cincinnati? Well, we're going to talk a little bit about that because today I've brought to the round table tonight from the HCDC, David Main. David?
Okay. Hi, Jason.
Glad you could join us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Well, you know, it's amazing how things work when you know certain people and you want to talk and you gain some knowledge and friends come knocking at your door and they're like, well, my boss would like to talk about what's going on in Hamilton County. Can you still bring them on? I'm like, absolutely. So this is where Bridget brings you along to explain exactly what's going on.
I appreciate that. That's part of her job as our marketing director and communications coordinator.
Then I think she's doing a fabulous job. I've always thought she's done a fabulous job. But I hope you're watching, Bridget.
Thank you.
And if you're watching tonight and you want to talk about this tonight, we are, of course, live on September 22nd. So if you are joining us, 825-3971 or live at waycross.org is our email. We're going to start out with our questions here, but no question will go unanswered tonight on County Fair. David, of course, we have to ask, HCDC, of course, part of it is, well, I know exactly what I'm going for, but of course, for the layman person who's watching for the first time, exactly what is HCDC and what are you doing for Hamilton County?
HCDC, at one time known as Hamilton County Development Company, is a private nonprofit corporation that was organized to promote economic development in the community. We do it through three primary program areas. We have small business lending through the SBA 504, Ohio Regional 166, and we have a new SBA program called the Intermediary Loan Program. In addition to making this financing available to small businesses, we administer the Hamilton County Economic Development Office. That's involved with tax incentives, business retention expansion, business coaching, and neighborhood community business revitalization. Last but not least, we developed and operate the HCDC Business Center, formerly known as the Hamilton County Business Center. We've gone through that change to have more of a common brand as such. The Business Center is a business incubator. An incubator is really four things. It's a facility that provides affordable, flexible space to startup companies. It is a nuisance reliever. What I mean by that, we can provide office administrative support services, computer access, conference rooms, fax machine, copy machine, access to the internet. It's an environment that's conducive to risk-taking and entrepreneurial thinking. What I mean by that is probably one of the loneliest thing a person can do, even though now entrepreneurship is considered hip, is to start their own business. Sure. Generally, as a rule, 80% of the businesses fail within 5 years. So chances are if someone has gone off, become an entrepreneur, started their business, their spouse, their significant others, their friends think they're nuts. Why would you do this? But being in an incubator, they're with other entrepreneurs who have faced, wrestled with, and solved similar problems. Now, I have to admit, I somewhat discounted that originally. I thought we'd just have a bunch of mopey entrepreneurs around the coffee machine. We had some of that. What we really had was entrepreneurs that kind of picked each other up, worked with each other, camaraderie. They were in it together, and they tend to work with each other. Sometimes they did joint ventures, even customers and suppliers. But last but not least, it's more than just merely group therapy among entrepreneurs. We have ready access to business management assistance, technical assistance, coaching, and business advice. We do it on staff with 2 full-time business coaches. We also have access to various seminars and outside business advisors. We have a number of programs that we operate, morning mentoring, e-kickstart, that provides outside experts to come in and provide guidance. Morning mentoring is a situation where entrepreneurs can meet with potential business advisors. With the change in funding, we can't say it's for funding anymore, but it's just getting business advice, and there's a potential to pick up some type of funding.
So basically, my first initial thought when reading this was, what a great way to look at something business-related that kind of, as you had said a number of times, boosts the morale, kind of gets people shaken up. That, again, these people who want to start a business don't get that opportunity to do so. And what we've gone through recently with the recession and things like that have brought a lot of new that spark to new business a little down from a couple people that we've brought to the round table and discussed that's what the city and the state wants, is that spark, that burst to bring them back. And it sounds like that's what the incubator is really all about.
The original concept behind the incubator was to be a response to the closing of the General Motors assembly plant in Norwood. We were seeing a number of the old line manufacturers close or move out, and we thought it made sense to make the core of Hamilton County, it happened to be in Norwood, a hotbed of entrepreneurial activity, where those individuals who maybe have a fledgling business, ideally they perhaps have something operating out of their home, their spare bedroom, their garage. It's getting enough traction, enough traffic that the neighbors are getting frustrated with the trucks down the street. The family is tired of the dining room or the spare bedroom. But more often than not, what we're finding is the entrepreneurs themselves, particularly when we're dealing with our co-work space, which I'll get into, they need to get into a professional business environment. Starbucks can serve for a while, but finally you wear out your welcome.
Absolutely.
Or as a couple of individuals have told me, you can't really have an intelligent conversation on the telephone with a business client when there's a dog barking in the background or you've got kids running around screaming. And plus there's some individuals that, while some individuals can work well at home, there's others they have to get out. They've got to get a routine. And the essence behind the incubator was to provide that. And in fact, that's why it was called the business center rather than business incubator. It denotes bigness, denotes stability, sustainability as such. And right now it's home to 61 businesses, roughly 10 in the co-works and 51 regular tenants. I'll describe a little bit if I can.
Yeah, absolutely.
Co-works and regular tenants.
Yeah, I was going to say, that sounds like there's some technical terms here we got to get used to.
Co-works is a relatively new concept, but when we started and what we still have, and it's still our mainstay, is we are a mixed-use incubator. We have office space, we have some lab space, we have some light assembly space, and we have some manufacturing space. And it's various different sizes. This is your own space. This is your own defined space. You can rent as minimum 125 square foot office. That's yours. You can put the whiteboards up in that. And that's done quite well. But we also found there was a need for what we call co-works, where someone is operating out of their home or, like I said, operating out of the corner coffee shop, but they need to they're not quite ready to have a formal office, but they need something that they can go and have a desk or shared space, go in there, get on the laptop, have access to Wi-Fi. We have a separate room if they need to make a private phone call, they can go in there as such. But the co-work space, for as little as $75 a month, they can come in there and rent, and basically it's access to a room with a number of desks, whiteboards and that, but there's no specific desk or anything. And this concept, I think, started out in the East and West Coast primarily because real estate was so expensive. We looked at it as just another way to serve the entrepreneurial community. But also, we've had some co-works tenants that have graduated, or shall we say moved into regular incubator space.
Now, of course, 25 years ago was what we're kind of looking at, and that's a very large milestone to see that something like this that really is catching steam now was here 25 years ago, at least in one form or another. Am I correct?
You're correct.
Okay.
You're correct.
How does something like that come here? Because realistically, you think East Coast, West Coast. This sounds something very, but here it is in our home, in our home.
25 years ago, it was somewhat of a new concept, but I had learned about it from an operation up in Chicago, Illinois, called the Fulton Carroll Center for Industry, and they had taken an abandoned plumbing factory. Ironically, while the building we bought, the old Floyd Johnson complex, was not abandoned, it originally started out as a plumbing supply house. They did vitreous china water closets, i.e. toilets and bathtubs as such. But it was the same situation. It was about economic, it was really an economic development play, and it was about jobs. It was trying to find a way to create jobs. And while startup businesses do not right away create jobs, down the road, what we were trying to do was to promote a homegrown industrial development policy, where we would grow these companies. Individuals already in the community deciding to start their business would come in the incubator, get it up and running, and like 3 to 5 years, we graduate them into the community. And that was the same thing that other incubators back in those days looked at. There have been a number of incubators in Hamilton County and in greater Cincinnati, and they've changed sometimes depending on whether it's .com boom or just certain situations that had arisen. But that's really how we got started. And I guess the other thing to look at, it's really part of a three-legged stool in economic development. And economic development occurs in 3 ways: through the attraction of outside firms, which is primarily something that regional groups do beyond Hamilton County. I mean, there's enough Hamilton counties around, and we try to promote that to nationwide or nationally, we'd get lost. But when you have greater Cincinnati through Ready Cincinnati that's promoting it, you work on attractions. The second leg is retention and expansion of existing business and industry. And generally, 70–80% of the net new jobs in any community come from the retention, but more importantly, the expansion of existing business and industry. And we had, our economic development office has honed in and really focused on that. But the third area was this homegrown, where let's find a way to encourage business startups. Yes, it's an option, but the other thing is to decrease the failure rate among businesses. In other words, by coming in an incubator, they're making a limited commitment as far as fixed costs on space. They would sign a 1-year lease, or they might sign a 6-month lease, but they haven't incurred all the trappings and all the costs. They could utilize support staff. When we started, we had telephone answering, and we had secretarial services. Now with cell phones, with PC computers, we don't have the telephone answering, we don't have the secretarial services, but the conference rooms are used extensively. The conference center, we've got various presentation software that we can provide, and the internet. Plus we have a central mail thing, and it's like I said, it gets back to the camaraderie, but it's a way to encourage them to go in there. Plus we require them, or strongly recommend they have a business plan. So in that rainy day in September, when nothing's going right, and they come down and they meet with Pat or Mary and one of our coaches, and nothing's going right, oftentimes the question is, have you looked at your business plan lately? And there's kind of a look, well, no. Maybe you ought to take a look at it. And it's interesting how they can somewhat come back and solve the issue, or at least come to grips with it. But it's like I said, it's just a number of those things, but it's allowing them to get in and to make mistakes and correct them easily. Instead of going out, buying a building, getting all kinds of infrastructure, all kinds of trappings and that, they can start out on a much smaller basis, see does it work, and then move on.
And again, like you're saying, it reduces that 80% loss. And I guess my first question on that is, of that, how many? Let's try that again. Okay. How successful has it become recently in removing that 80% and getting some graduated jobs out there?
We've seen, we have about a 60% success rate after 5 years of companies that have graduated from the incubator and are either successfully operating independently, or they've been bought out and are part of another concern.
Wow.
And it comes about because not only the reducing the upfront costs, but having some of the access to the business mentoring, the business coaching, the guidance. Part of it is, it can be anything from how do you get a business loan, sometimes maybe working with them on accounting. We have a number of seminars we put on. So it's really the education process. Though we have, most of the entrepreneurs in our incubator are highly educated, but they're educated in a particular field, some field of engineering, some field of maybe bioscience, genetics, but they haven't run a business. They're not familiar with cash flow. They're not familiar, they may or may not be familiar with sales. They've got a number of the trappings of business, the HR component, the human relations component, the strategic planning component. Where does this take them?
Well, it sounds as if it's really kind of putting those building blocks together of, you may have the ideas of A, B, and C, but D, E, and F were never a thought. You merge the two together, and you're coming up with that perfect plan.
That's right.
which I think is great. My follow-up or moving forward question is, if you're an onset and you want to be in a new business and want to use this, how are people coming to you? Are they seeking you out, or are you seeking them out?
For the most part, they're seeking us out, and it's interesting because of all this interest with entities and entrepreneurship. We're seeing probably our best, in the last several months, we're seeing our best flow of tenants that we have probably ever.
Wow.
And I think some of it is word of mouth. They've talked to other entrepreneurs. There's just this general buzz of entrepreneurship and these various, whether they're business accelerators, whether there's type of venture firms, even though the vast majority of businesses will never get venture capital, or they will never get even angel capital. It stops after their own money, their friends and family. It stops at either conventional lenders, banks, or economic development lenders like HCDC. So it's really, there's a number of sources. Also, the UC College of Engineering has been a source, and just kind of just getting the word out. You know, someone Googles Cincinnati Business Incubators, I think our website hcdc.com would show up on that. But it's just kind of word of mouth, or maybe bankers, or just a number, even realtors. Because the other thing we do not compete with conventional real estate. If the business has to be 18 months old or younger, it has to be it cannot be in conventional rentable space. So they're operating out of their home, their garage, or they're borrowing space from some other company, but not as a conventional tenant. We're not looking to pull companies out of conventional real estate.
You're looking at those babies, those true infants of business, so to speak.
We are. Ideally, we're looking at them where they do have some sales, or they have a sense of the market. We can help them refine it. We can help them maybe define it better, but hopefully they've got some type of sales. It's more than just a concept. It's more than just, I've got this idea. I've got this widget. Hopefully they've thought it through, or we'll send them to other entrepreneur assistance providers. We'll send them to the small business development centers. We'll send them to SCORE to kind of refine this better. I mean, we can work with them. We can lay out. If they've got this plan, we can lay some things out. And the other thing we don't do is we don't draft or write their business plan. Okay. If a person can't write a business plan, they're not going to be able to implement it.
Well, and again, you as an organization needs to be able to set those parameters, and if they're not ready, it really kind of shows them that, if you don't believe that they're not ready, then you're not going to put the faith and trust behind them yet. Doesn't mean you won't turn them away at some point. If they come back with a proper business plan or the next steps, you'd be probably glad to accept them into your family.
Well, and from what I hear from our incubator manager and our assistant manager, the coach, some of the most gratifying situations when you have someone come in to meet with you, they're not ready, and you give them a homework assignment. Some we never hear from again, but others, they come back, they do the assignment, they make the connection, we give them an outline of a business plan. It doesn't have to be anything fancy, it doesn't have to be an embossed volume or anything. It can be on a legal pad, it can be handwritten. Some of those are the best kind. But it's something that they've gone out, they've taken it to heart, they've looked at the homework, they've come back, they've done it, and maybe there's some other things we have to do with them as well. How are they going to finance it? Where are they looking for sales? But those kind of things, it's much better to work things out on paper and find out this isn't going to work and move on or modify it, as opposed to incurring costs and expenses with real money and real people, where you're just throwing things down the drain.
And again, you're going to that 80% once
Right.
again, and in this day, not an easy thing to, again, as you're saying, capital is not easy. Something easy to just, it's under the pillow or anything like that.
No,
if
it's
it
not.
were, it sure would be nice. But looking at something like this, again, if someone were to do that, they've got their plan, they come to you, what would you consider as something as, you can't really use typical, because I don't like using that, but what would typically happen if I came in, I have my business plan, I'm ready, I've got a little bit of capital behind me, I'm ready to start up. I've only been there 6 months. I've just started.
You started.
I just started doing coffee mugs. Sure.
Okay.
What would be something typical for someone who's watching, like, maybe that is something I could pick up and do and utilize them? What would typically happen from the point of coming to you, and let's say we're there, you said it can be short term, so let's say I'm there for a year.
Basically, what we do is they would fill out an application, part of it, and attach their business plan. We'd run a little bit of a background check. We'd run a credit check because we're renting them space.
Absolutely.
So we want to make sure that they have the wherewithal, or they have some credit worthiness. And then it's a matter of figuring out, does it really fit? Not every business would fit in the HCDC Business Center. We're on a dead-end street in Norwood. Retail would probably not work.
Probably not.
We're zone general business, or I think it's light manufacturing, but retail probably doesn't work. We're not looking at residents or anything like that either. But we're looking for companies that are, I guess the best way to describe, they used to say high tech, but it's really more innovative and scalable. And what I mean by that is they're going to grow. We're not looking at an artist colony. We're not looking to have a bunch of lawyers or a bunch of accountants in the building. We're looking for businesses that are going to grow. Maybe it's only going to be 5, 10, 15 jobs, but that's fine. Something that can be a sustainable business, a small business, that's fine. Maybe even 10 to 15 employees, but we're looking at a business that would be creating jobs over and above the entrepreneur.
I think that it was an interesting point that you made. It's not an artist colony, and I think that's what a lot of people might have in their mindset, that that's what this is. We're just a bunch of people, free thinkers, we're coming up. No, you're actually helping these people create sustainable jobs.
And businesses,
and businesses
that would be sustainable and move and remain and grow in our community, in Hamilton County, in Southwest Ohio. Investment capitalists, angel venture capitals, they want to know what the exit strategy. How are they going to sell this business? How is the entrepreneur going to move on? How are they going to make money? Either through an IPO, initial public offering, or through a merger or an acquisition. Our exit strategy is really, where are you going to graduate within the community after the 3 to 5 years? And some take longer. Some have gone 8 to 10 years. That was the other thing that hit us with the recession. They were creditworthy, but landlords could not get the financing because they had no track. The companies were not nationally rated, so they couldn't get the financing for the leasehold improvements until the recession turned around. But we're really looking at companies that are going to. Our term of exiting is, how do you exit from the incubator into the community, into conventional space, be it Blue Ash, be it Norwood, be it the city of Cincinnati, where probably the plurality of our businesses have gone.
And it sounds, from the industries that are present within the business center, that sounds like target areas for them. Blue Ash heavily with industrial and the idea, and Norwood obviously keeping it very local. But going into the whole city of Cincinnati and Hamilton County in general, do you find that there has been ease of going into, or out of the incubator, out of your space, into the real world? Or has it been a bit of a struggle?
I've heard that I've heard from some successful graduates, and others have heard the same thing. There's a little bit of a culture shock. And it's more or less, I like to say they would miss me. Of course, they really, they don't, usually I deal more with the problem children, those that are struggling in some capacity, whereas the coaches are dealing more with the guidance and the business assistance. But what I've heard is they miss the coaching, but they miss the other tenants. They miss the other entrepreneurs. When we had our 25th event last week, we brought back Dr. Tom Reed. He had a company called Genomatics 10 years ago, as it was, could not get capital in the community, but found it in Virginia, so moved there. Last year, a year ago, his company, now called Intrexon, became the largest IPO of any biomedical firm.
Wow.
They're involved in DNA modifications and that. And there's been a number of things that have grown. But it was interesting when Tom came back that he cited some of the tenants that he would, they we're having good day, bad day, they might run down to UDF and get an ice cream together or something, but just bouncing things off the wall with each other, and because everyone is in the same boat. They may be at different stages, but someone, say, has been in there a couple years, they know what it's like to be the new person on the block. Whereas if they have this commonality, even though it's a different type of business. We've tried to keep from having competitors. We've had on occasion some in there which sort of worked out, but we tried to stay away from that. Though there's such a myriad of businesses, there's not that much. We haven't seen that much
As I
competition.
say, I don't know how you would be able to do that. I mean, with little nuances and variations in how things are, especially with the tech side of things,
Right.
it probably would be very difficult to do so.
It is.
And I like the way that this sounds, that we did mention that an artist colony, but what really it is a gathering of like minds coming together
Right.
to think and to help themselves out of these instances. Do you feel that outside of the business center and going into the real world, that loss of a connection with others is part of a downfall to a business or an entrepreneurial business?
I don't think necessarily, because the other thing we try to build with them is perhaps, and we go through this with a process. We have like a 1 to 24 month session, and then a 24 month to say 48, and we also do a session on beyond business incubation. Mm-hmm. What does it take? How do you negotiate a commercial lease? We'll bring in some tenant reps to explain that. But the other thing we try to do is to get them to set up an advisory board, a board of directors, somebody to bounce things off, or some individuals to bounce things off. Maybe they end up ignoring them because they want a sounding board. They don't want the whole violin, so to speak. But so hopefully when they get out, they have this connectivity with other entrepreneurs. Maybe they're from the incubator, or we've been able to help them find through the morning mentoring program, through eKickstart, they may be able to find some other mentors, or at least some networking.
Sure, and that's where I was kind of going, is that it opens up a different sense of networking.
I think it's just the fact that when they're in the incubator, they can walk down the hall and they knock on the door and they're there.
Right.
When they move into their own space, Eric's not there, or Olivier's not there, or and they've got to pick up the phone and call them, or send them an email or something, or a text.
And I think that does make a difference, obviously, in our day and age when a lot of people don't get that face time. Maybe with this is gaining that sense of community once again, talking to one another, other than just picking up a phone or writing an email.
I think there is some of that. We try to have coffees on a monthly basis. We try to bring in some speakers in that. Some are well attended, some are not. Usually, if we have a seminar on finance, how to find money, those tend to be pretty well attended. Though, the other thing we've noticed is I think a lot of the entrepreneurs are getting more sophisticated and better versed on how to raise money, and where not to raise money, and how to, most of them have learned, as far as working capital, you don't want to use Uncle Sam. Right. You want to make sure you've set aside your money for the tax deposits, the employment tax, and that, put that in a separate account. We try to instill that.
Do you think that comes from our recent past as to what's happened, or do you think this is a different mindset in a different generation of the means of thinking? And the reason why I think of different generation is that, unfortunately, my grandmother just passed away, but she was of the mindset of the Depression era. She was a Depression era child. And we are still going through and finding places where she did not want money allotted in different places, but she hid it in different places. So giving that idea of how money should be allocated, or where it should be taken, and as you were saying, placing this in a different account as opposed to doing it that way. Do you think it's generational, or do you think it's of our recent past?
I think what we're seeing is, with more entrepreneurs, an employee who's not really an owner or chief officer of a company probably does not have that, unless they're in the accounting department or the finance department, does not really that well versed on business finance. And I think we're seeing a change now where one of the things they pick up, I got to finance this venture, where do I go about? And they tend to be a little more sophisticated, a little more educated on, okay, I need a certain amount of capital. Some of it can be equity, non-borrowed, ownership. Some of it I can probably have a certain amount of debt. And they seem to, the only reason I say that is I'm seeing a little more, we're seeing more sophistication in that realm as far as financing. We still have some though that we'll lay out for them that here's the sources and here's the hierarchy of finance, and you can see the wheels turning and oh yeah, I didn't realize that, an aha moment, which is fine.
Sure.
I'd rather have them know that than going out on a limb and who knows, signing up for something they really can't afford or whatever.
Do you find that a lot of people, when they graduate, kind of gravitate back because they're missing something, or that they relied on something that they didn't realize that out in the real world, again, like we were talking about the camaraderie, but again, something else to the fact of I should have thought of this type of financing, or I didn't think of this when it came to a building, or I'm kind of at a loss.
Well, when someone graduates, we don't sever all ties. If they have an issue or they have something they need question, I mean, we're there to work with them
Sure.
on that. And a lot of them have developed their own resources, their own, I guess you could call them mentors, but their own sources, everything from finance to advice or whatever. Plus, I think they probably have become more sophisticated themselves. I mean, Tom Reed mentioned that. He says he realized how much he learned. It was a real education process, not only being a trained scientist, how's that pronounced? Geneticist, yes. PhD, I guess, in that. But then learning the ins and outs of business finance, strategic planning, mergers, acquisitions. He had to pick that up along the way. So I think maybe there's kind of a recognition and a willingness to do that. Plus, I think while we're a mixed-use incubator, we have a certain number of technology-based, be it in measurement technologies, vibration testing, polymers. We have a nanotech firm in there. So they have some of that support if they're already dealing with certain professionals, accountants, attorneys as such to guide them along the way, and hopefully they're getting some of that as well.
Over the past 25 years, you've probably seen many different people walk in and out of these doors. What would you say is a trend now as a comparison to the 25 years ago? What was the entrepreneurial space, and then today, what are we kind of aiming towards?
25 years ago, of course, we didn't really have much in the way of the internet, and I'm not sure how much there was in IT as such compared to what we have today. So we have much more of the internet type or the IT type companies. In those days, I think we probably had more assembly, more even light manufacturing. We had some of the professionals. Some service providers. Today, I think we're dealing more with, I would say, not only IT, but there's just a little bit more sophisticated type of business model or just business component service as such than we've had before. There's different needs. We're getting involved, and one of the things, for example, is we were just buying an old paint factory. We got into the beginning as far as environmental and dealing with cleanup and that. We have some environmental remediation firms that have come through the building and with new technologies to clean up sites. So we've had those things, or providing some type of guidance to companies, environmental issues and that. Or we've seen things with water and water quality that we haven't had before, or just how different. And we have a number of pharmaceutical and biotech firms in the facility that the science, the the components didn't exist then. I mean, we were beyond the rotary phones, but we didn't have cell phones then.
Unless 25, that's true, unless you were carrying the brick.
Yeah, the brick.
So you definitely have seen change happen within this area. Let's talk a little bit about success. We're a little bit over halfway through, believe it or not. Let's definitely talk about success. You have started this wonderful incubation and business center to help those out. How do you feel it has helped Hamilton County, and what successes have you seen make Hamilton County their home from the incubator?
We've had a number of companies that have graduated. We have a company, Maverick Polymers, or Maverick Corporation. They graduated to Blue Ash. They're involved in polymers for aircraft. Also, that has a biomedical component. We've had we've had a company called Scenario Learning that initially graduated to Silverton. I understand they are in the process of, if they have already moved into the Nyer building in Keystone Crossing in Evanston. They've taken over space there because they've expanded. We have a number of other firms. A company that was when our building, they were called Thinkronize. They've gone through, I think Backtracker is the component, but they're dealing with school safety in that. They're in Sharonville. They've added jobs. There's been the spinoff, and right now we're sitting. I think we have close to 200 employees, excluding the 21 that work for HCDC, the 3 programs that are in and out of the building. So there's just a payroll, and we're looking at probably around, with the tenants alone, around a $10 million payroll. I'm sure that some of the individual companies have that on their own as far as what they're doing. Maverick has around 75 employees. I'm not sure exactly what some of the others, the exact employment figures, but I would say it's probably pushing the thousands of jobs right now that are in Hamilton County for the most part. Some in Southwest Ohio, but about 90% that have successfully graduated have remained in Hamilton County because that's where they're based. That's
I was going to say, I'm hoping that's by their choice, correct?
I think it's by their choice, but it's a choice dictated by their customers, maybe their suppliers, but their employees.
Sure.
Employees. They're not going to move across the state or across the country if they want to retain their employees, unless they're willing to relocate them. The only time that doesn't work is in some cases where they haven't been able to get financing. But with the change, with the ecosystem maturing how it is, when you have these other entities that provide, Cincy Tech and others that can provide access to capital, I think we're able to better serve these entrepreneurs that are looking at the venture capital or the private investment capital than we were in the past.
So I guess my continuation with success and the success rate, how would you say you would compare to other incubators that are similar to yours in other states?
That's a good question. I'm not sure we've really done much in exact testing, but I think I would believe, and the one I'm thinking of is out in St. Charles, Missouri. In fact, the company is somewhat uncanny. They have an SBA loan program, they have an economic development office, and they have an incubator, just like us.
Yeah.
They're a little bit smarter than us. Unlike our incubator built in 1908, theirs was built in the 60s, so it's a much newer building. But I think from what I'm gathering, talking with them, they have a similar success rate because, like us, they're mixed use. If you're strictly, say, a biomedical incubator, it takes a lot longer. Unless you're involved in IT, anything else that needs FDA approval, you can be looking at 8 to 10 years before you'll get something off the ground, and by then maybe it's sold off unless there's a way to hang on to it. So if you want to see a midterm hit, and you're not going to get, job-wise, it's not something that's going to happen overnight. Mm-hmm. I mean, we have not had a company that's come in the incubator, graduated in 6 months, and had 100 jobs. It's rather a slow, incremental, and it's not even a straight line. Sometimes they go through peaks and valleys. They've gone through
Like a true business.
Oh yeah, they've had to lay off half their staff, or they have to cut back, or they go for a couple of years without salaries in that. But there are, I guess, hundreds of incubators in the country. From what I gather, we're one of the larger ones. We are, when it comes to tenants, I believe we're the largest in the state of Ohio. We are the, I think size-wise, we're probably the second largest in the state in square footage. But I think when it comes to tenants, we're probably currently the largest in the state of Ohio.
That's something pretty proud to be, wouldn't you say?
I would think so. It's been you know, starting 31 years ago with one employee and going up to 21 with HCDC, and then really having one program that was limited to suburban Hamilton County to expand that to, you know, 3 loan programs, and by state we can make the SBA programs can go anywhere in Ohio, anywhere in Kentucky, and 3 counties in southeast Indiana.
We've talked about the success of businesses that come through your facility. What about the future success for you? What are you looking to see that HCDC can do in the future?
I'd like to see us continue to provide business support and business development services, particularly those firms and enterprises that can not only grow but create employment opportunities, that can create jobs. Really, and I've been in economic development now for probably 35 years, I have a job because others don't. So what we're trying to do, whether it's the loan program, whether it's the economic development office or the incubator, we are trying to help businesses grow, but really grow to create employment opportunities and jobs. So with that in mind, hopefully we continue to enhance the loan programs. The SBA 504 program years ago had a refinance component that was a 2-year trial. Once it got up and going with a couple of false starts with the SBA, it was quite successful in helping established businesses refinance high interest debt, which allowed them to pull money out for working capital and to hire people and to do things they couldn't have done when they had the high interest debt. So hopefully that will come back. I would like to see maybe expand some of our other program areas to provide more services. One of the things we did with the retention and expansion of existing business and industry, and let me explain what that's about. Typically, you go and you meet with a company, and it had been an external problem. They need a crosswalk. They've got a security issue, but it's more of an external, say, with government, or they've got, maybe it was a business neighbor problem, which we tried to, I don't know how you work that out. What we found, though, and where we got into a new concept with business retention, expansion, but coaching, is sometimes it was internal. We had particularly small businesses, and this started out, we had a contract with the Uptown Consortium and worked in the Corryville area where these small businesses, it was maybe a cash flow issue, it was a management issue, it was a marketing issue, it was a sales issue. So we brought on a business coach to provide guidance. Maybe it was in strategic planning, maybe it was in marketing, maybe it was in sales, or how to, it was more of an internal operation. So we're looking to probably expand that program more, trying to find ways also to help revitalize the local community business districts. And then last but not least, with the incubator, I think eventually we're going to have to look at some type of upgrade on the facility. We think there's also an opportunity to do a second facility in Hamilton County in the north. What we're finding is most of the entrepreneurs come south of Ronald Reagan Highway. They even come in from Kentucky and that, but they tend to be south of that. We think there's some opportunities north, the Blue Ash, Sharonville, Springdale, maybe Forest Park area, where a satellite facility or a second facility can go in and provide a similar type of programs and create another hub or hotbed of entrepreneurial activity. So I think those are probably some of the areas we're looking at right now, and a lot depends too on not only finding the resources, but what's the demand.
Sure.
If you don't have it's like any business, if you don't have the market, if you don't have the demand, and you can manipulate a market, but you can't create demand and you cannot create a market.
Correct. And I think that's probably why growth doesn't happen always in the speed we all want, because the demand may or may not be there. You made mention, of course, your work in economic development, and the one question that always gets asked here on County Fair is down in, of course, Hamilton County is a very, I would say, a tough bed sometimes. What do you think would be the key to crack in Hamilton County for economic development-wise, to make it the place to come back to? We're seeing a lot of revitalization, and we're happy for that, but from an economic development standpoint, do you see that there are other things that the county could be doing, or through things that are going on in your facility to make that move forward?
I think actually Hamilton County overall is a very attractive place in which to do business and to come back. I think it has a number of things going for it. It has a reasonable cost of living, a reasonable cost of doing business. It has, for the most part, what I would call a pro-business climate. Doesn't mean they want businesses to run roughshod over them, but I think it is a good environment as far as business. I think you have a very wide array of call it neighborhoods. You know, if you want an urban lifestyle, you've got downtown, you've got the revitalization of over the Rhine. But if you would rather be in a suburban situation, maybe it's one of the older suburbs, you know, the tree-lined streets, or one of the newer ones, you've got that. And if you want land, you want to be in an ex-urban environment, you can do that. And you can get from one place to the other fairly easily. It's not like the coasts where you're going to spend 2 hours commuting. So you can...
and that's usually to move about 4 blocks.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But you don't have to go that far, and you're out in the country, or you don't go that far, and you're in an urban setting. So I think that's what it has going for it. I think that overall, like I said, it's a pro-business climate. We're also looking at what can be done, particularly with some of the inner ring suburbs, to make them, help revitalize them, make them more attractive to businesses. One of the things with the community business districts, they've gone through transformations, and granted, the malls are now going through transformations too with the internet. Sure. Business districts, community business districts tend to come in 2 flavors. You have the unique ones like the Reading Bridal District, where it's drawn to them, versus you have the neighborhood service. Unfortunately, a lot of the neighborhood service districts tend to be falling by the wayside, because they'll end up going to the shopping centers and that. So it's really a matter of trying to find what other type of attraction, like a bridal district. And I think that just kind of bubbled up. It wasn't something. I would be very surprised if Reading at one time said, "Yeah, we'd like to have a bridal district." So it just kind of.
They brought their business plan in on that and thought.
Yeah, I don't think they did that. And it's because other communities have tried it, and it really hasn't worked like that. It's almost, things have to kind of bubble up. It has to be ready. It's like entrepreneurship. We have these other entities that are involved, be they business accelerators or just the idea. And I think, due to the fact that we have such a probably the most solid flow of potential tenants we've ever had in the last couple of months, I think it's testimony to that we've raised the awareness of entrepreneurship, and this is something that should be considered. And you're not looked at as, someone's not looking at it as an oddball or whatever, because they want to start a business. It's becoming more of the norm and more of an accepted practice, business practice.
And I was actually going to ask that, is that something you find is commonplace now? Because the more that I've thought about it in my past, is that you didn't talk about a lot of people who are starting a business or wanted to start a business because of the risk and of that frightening nature. Nowadays, that's not so...
I think that's probably one of the biggest generational challenges.
Okay.
And I mean, when I was in school, I probably never thought about starting a business. I mean, I basically ended up starting HCDC. I mean, I was hired to get it up and running, but I never really thought about that. Whereas my kids they haven't done it, but they've they've asked me about it, and they've talked about it, and some of their friends have actually started businesses. Rather than working for the corporation, they've gone out and started some businesses here in Cincinnati. None of them have located in the incubator, but they've started their own enterprises. So I think that's kind of generational.
And that's an interesting way to look at it. That of all the things that are somewhat generational, this is it. This is that new idea. Do you think maybe a little bit of that was the internet, giving that little bit of freedom?
I think some of it was the internet. I think it's just in general that it was always looked at. I think some people looked at it as being somewhat I wouldn't say glamorous, but maybe had a little bit of a sex appeal to starting your own business. But if they really looked into it and realized what the failure rate was, and to a certain extent still is, if it's improper, it's like incubators too. I mean, there's been a lot of incubators that haven't made it either throughout the country, and it's a matter of being appropriately planned and funded and pulled together. But I think it's become much more an accepted a career path, so to speak. The other thing we found is we have serial entrepreneurs that have started a business and sold it off, or even now the other thing I've noticed, they started a business and they failed or they've shut it down. And they've paid people off, but they're at it again. And I think that stigma is being lost, and that's probably a good thing. Because when you really think about it, how many business failures did Henry Ford have?
Well, yeah.
How many? Many have had business failures, and I think the other thing is, particularly if you learn from it, the second time or third time, and we've had the serial entrepreneurs tell us that have been in the incubator, the second and third time is much easier than the first.
And I think again, coming up with something very interesting on that is that you're right. We don't see we see failure, and once failure happens, we push it to the side, we don't learn from it, or we hide from it. And you're saying that a lot of these people are finally learning from those mistakes and moving forward.
I think a lot of them are.
Well, believe it or not, we have run to the bottom of our time.
Oh my goodness.
Isn't it amazing how time goes so quickly?
It really is.
David, I'm so thankful. We've been speaking here on County Fair with David Main from HCDC. I want to thank you very much. Again, we could have done a whole separate hour again.
You're certainly welcome.
And you can always come back to the round table to discuss things again as things continue.
Thank you very much.
I do want to congratulate you on 25 years, so I can't have to get
Appreciate
that in.
that.
And tell Bridget thank you for bringing us on.
Will do. Okay.
Thank you so much. And I want to thank all of you for joining us as well. I hope this has been an enjoyable and an informative, informational evening for you. If you have any questions or comments, you can always get in contact with us here. We'll get you to the right channels as well. I'm Jason Grzgorek, Waycross Community Media's Government Access Coordinator, giving you the opportunity to talk to those in the know here on County Fair. Have a great evening, and we will see you next time. We'll hope that the microphones are done, but...
Oh, that's all right.
Okay, there we go.
So we're off?